My stepmom manipulated my dad into kicking me out for my pregnant stepsister. Years later, he was homeless and begging for my help. It started at dinner with my father, my stepmother Cecilia, and my stepsister Dawn. My father cleared his throat and said they needed to discuss something important with me. Before he could even finish his sentence, Cecilia jumped in. She said they needed my room for Dawn and her husband Robert since she was pregnant. I actually laughed at first, thinking it was some kind of weird joke. I've lived in that room my entire life. My mom and I painted the walls together when I was 10. All of my memories are in that room. But when no one else laughed, I realized they were serious. I tried to stay calm. I reminded them that I had been contributing to household expenses for the past 2 years while attending college. I was paying rent, helping with utilities, even buying groceries sometimes. Cecilia's face turned this scary shade of red. She slammed both hands on the table, making all the plates jump, and stood up so fast her chair fell backward. She pointed her finger in my face and started screaming about how I was being selfish and ungrateful, how Dawn needed the space more than me, how I was old enough to live on my own. My father just sat there the entire time, pushing his food around his plate like it was the most interesting thing in the world. Dawn had this little smirk on her face. I realized she'd known about this. They'd probably planned it all out before dinner. I guess I should give some background here. My mom passed away when I was 12 after a long battle with cancer. She was the kind of mom who packed surprise notes in my lunch and never missed a single baseball game. After she died, my dad was lost. He threw himself into his work at the law firm, and I barely saw him. Then he met Cecilia at some work function when I was 13, and they got married less than a year later. Dawn came to live with us, and suddenly I had a new family whether I wanted one or not. Things were okay for the first few months. Cecilia tried to play happy families, decorating the house and making big Sunday dinners, but it didn't last long. She started making these little comments at first. How messy teenage boys are, how much space I took up, how Dawn needed more room for her things. Then the comments got more direct. She'd talk about how I was old enough to live on my own, how I was holding Dawn back from having the childhood she deserved, how I was a burden on their finances despite my dad's good job at the law firm. I tried to make it work. I really did. I kept my head down, studied hard, got good grades. When I turned 16, I got a part-time job at the local grocery store and started contributing to household expenses, even though I didn't have to. I thought maybe if I proved I wasn't a burden, things would get better. They didn't. If anything, Cecilia got worse. She'd go through my room when I was at school, claiming she was cleaning but really just looking for reasons to complain. She'd turn off the hot water while I was in the shower, saying I was wasting utilities. She even started scheduling family dinners for times she knew I'd be at work, then complained to my dad about how I was never around for family time. Last night, when I tried to reason with them, pointing out that I paid rent and helped with bills, Cecilia completely lost it. She started throwing my dinner plate around, screaming about how ungrateful I was after everything they'd done for me. Dawn just sat there with this smug look on her face, rubbing her belly. I looked at my father, silently begging him to say something, to defend me, to be my dad, but he wouldn't even look at me. He just kept staring at his plate, occasionally nodding at whatever Cecilia was saying, like some broken bobblehead doll. The father I knew growing up, the man who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework, seemed to have disappeared completely. I tried to reason with them. My voice was shaking, but I kept going. I explained that I was still in college with 2 years left, that I'd been faithfully paying rent every month, that this was my home too. I talked about how I'd been working part-time at the grocery store to help with expenses, how I maintained good grades despite working, but Cecilia wasn't hearing any of it. She cut me off mid-sentence, her voice cold as ice, saying I had until morning to pack my things and leave. That's when I lost it a little. I stood up too, my chair scraping against the floor. I asked them where they expected me to go in the middle of the semester. Cecilia rolled her eyes and said I should have thought about that before being so selfish. Dawn chimed in, saying I was ruining her special announcement with my drama. I felt like I was in some bizarre alternate reality where nothing made sense anymore. Finally, I turned to my father again, practically begging for support. He looked up at last, but I almost wished he hadn't. His eyes were empty, like he was looking through me instead of at me. He spoke in this quiet, defeated voice, telling me it would be best if I found my own place, since Dawn needed stability for her baby. Those words felt like a physical blow. I couldn't help it. I brought up the promise he made to my dying mother. I was there in the hospital room when he held my mom's hand and swore he would always take care of me. He flinched when I mentioned it, but Cecilia jumped in again, screaming about how dare I bring that up, how I was manipulating the situation, how I was trying to guilt-trip them. I've been living in my car since this morning, parked behind the college library. I had to miss my classes today to figure out what to do. My whole life is in my 2008 Honda Civic, whatever I could fit anyway. I spent hours calling everyone I could think of. My mom's sister hung up as soon as I explained the situation. My uncle said I needed to grow up and stop causing problems. My grandparents said they were too old to deal with family drama. Nobody wants to help. I don't have many friends because I spent most of my time working and studying. The few I have are all living in dorms or with their parents. I have some savings from my part-time job, but it's nowhere near enough for an apartment deposit. I've been working at a local grocery store, making just enough to cover my portion of the bills and tuition. The worst part is, Dawn doesn't even need my room. Their house has 4 bedrooms. My room, Dawn's room, my parents' room, and a guest room. But Cecilia insists they need 2 rooms for the baby. One for the nursery, and one for Dawn and Robert. It's just an excuse to get rid of me, and everyone knows it. I'm sitting in my car right now, parked behind the library, using their Wi-Fi to write this. I had to leave most of my stuff behind because I couldn't fit everything in my car. When I tried to go back for the rest of my things this afternoon, Cecilia had changed the locks. My father texted saying I could come get my things when they were home, but only if I accepted their decision without arguing. I just can't believe my father chose his stepdaughter over his own son. I don't know what to do. I have work tomorrow morning and I don't even have a place to shower. Update 1. Living in a car is worse than I ever imagined. The past 2 weeks have been a complete nightmare. After my last post, I spent 3 days desperately calling every relative I could think of. Each call was more humiliating than the last. My father's brother, Uncle Steve, actually laughed when I explained my situation. He said something about how this generation wants everything handed to them, then told me I was old enough to figure things out on my own. This is the same uncle who lived in my grandparents' basement until he was 35. I even tried calling my mom's best friend, Linda, who used to be like a second mother to me. She would take me for ice cream after mom's chemo sessions and let me cry in her car where dad couldn't see. But when I called her, she just kept saying she couldn't get involved because her real estate business depends on referrals from my father's law firm. Money matters more than the kid she used to call her bonus son, I guess. The reality of being homeless hit hard the first night I couldn't find a safe place to park. I ended up in a Walmart parking lot, too scared to sleep. Every car that drove by made me jump. I've been rotating between different parking lots so security doesn't catch on. The library during the day for Wi-Fi, the 24-hour gym at night so I can use their showers in the morning. Sometimes the park when I need quiet to study. My grades are tanking. I got a 52 on my economics midterm because I couldn't focus. Kept thinking about where I'd sleep that night instead of supply and demand curves. My calculus professor pulled me aside after class to ask if everything was okay because I fell asleep during his lecture. I couldn't tell him I was exhausted from staying awake all night because some guys were acting sketchy around my car. I picked up a second job at this 24-hour diner near campus. The pay is terrible and the manager's a jerk, but they let us eat the canceled orders and I need the money for an apartment deposit. That's actually where something good finally happened. I met Drake, another server there. He noticed I kept taking extra shifts and staying late to eat leftover food. One slow night, he asked about my story, and I ended up telling him everything. Turns out Drake lost both his parents in a car crash last year. He's been living in a small trailer and working full-time while trying to save money for trade school. When he heard about my situation, he offered to let me stay with him if I split the rent. Said he could use help with bills anyway. It's the first kind thing anyone's done for me since this started. Last weekend, I went back to get the rest of my things from the house. That was a special kind of hell. Cecilia followed me around the entire time like I was some kind of criminal, checking every box and bag to make sure I wasn't stealing anything, as if I'd want anything from them at this point. The worst part was seeing Dawn in my old room with her Pinterest boards and paint samples, already planning the nursery. She was pointing at the wall my mom and I had painted together when I was 10, talking about how she wanted to do a cloud theme there. My father was home, but he might as well have been a ghost. Walked right past me like I was invisible. I learned something interesting though. Mrs. Chen from next door caught me as I was loading the last box into my car. She's lived there since before mom died and always brings me leftovers when she makes dumplings. She told me Robert actually moved in 2 weeks before they kicked me out. They'd been planning this whole thing for a while. Then she dropped the real bomb. She overheard Dawn bragging to her friend on the porch about how easy it was to get rid of me. Apparently, Dawn had been pushing Cecilia for months to kick me out, saying she needed more space for her growing family. Mrs. Chen apologized for not warning me sooner. She slipped me a container of dumplings and her phone number, telling me to call if I ever need anything. The betrayal hurts worse than sleeping in my car. When Cecilia first moved in, Dawn and I actually got along great. We'd stay up late watching horror movies and swapping stories. She'd come to me for advice about boys, and I'd help her with her math homework. I covered for her countless times when she snuck out to see Robert, lent her money she never paid back, even took the blame when she dented Dad's car. I really thought we were friends, maybe even real siblings. Now I realize she was just using me until she didn't need me anymore. I'm moving into Drake's trailer tomorrow. It's small and in a pretty rough area, but anything's better than my car at this point. Had to drop 2 of my classes because I can't handle a full course load while working both jobs. The diner gig barely pays enough to cover half the trailer rent, and I need the grocery store job for food and gas. But I'm not giving up on my degree, even if it takes me longer to finish. My father hasn't called once to check if I'm okay. The only contact I've had from any of them is a text from Cecilia yesterday, demanding I change my mailing address because my college letters are cluttering their mailbox. She ended it with a smiley face emoji. I didn't respond. Update 2. Life has fallen into a rough routine. I'm still living with Drake in his trailer, working both jobs, and somehow managing to stay in school part-time. The trailer's heating broke last week and the landlord won't fix it, so we've been sleeping in layers of clothes, but at least it's a roof over my head. Drake's been teaching me how to cook with cheap ingredients. Turns out you can make a lot of different meals with rice and beans. But something happened last week that turned my world upside down again. I was restocking shelves at the grocery store when I saw Margaret, my father's secretary of 15 years. She's known me since I was a kid, used to keep candy in her desk for when Dad would bring me to the office. When she saw me, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. She tried to leave quickly, practically running down the cereal aisle, but then she stopped, turned around, and came back. She looked nervous, kept glancing around like someone might see her talking to me. Then she dropped a bomb that made everything so much worse. Dawn isn't pregnant. She never was. She and Robert had been trying for months but couldn't conceive. They used the pregnancy lie to convince my father to kick me out because they wanted my room. Margaret overheard Dawn laughing about it with Robert in my father's office, bragging about how well their plan worked. I felt like I was going to throw up right there in the middle of my shift. All those nights sleeping in my car, dropping my classes, working until my feet felt like they were bleeding, all because of a lie. But that wasn't even the worst part. Margaret told me my father found out about the lie 2 weeks after I left. 2 weeks. He knew I was sleeping in my car, struggling to survive, all because of a fake pregnancy, and he did nothing. I couldn't help myself. I texted him right there in the middle of my shift. I asked him how he could let me stay homeless knowing Dawn had lied. His response made me want to scream. He wrote back saying it didn't matter because Dawn and Robert were trying to have a baby anyway, so they still needed the space. He added that I was being dramatic about the homeless thing because I could have found an apartment if I really wanted to, as if I had the money for first and last month's rent plus security deposit while trying to pay for college. Speaking of college, I decided to check on my college fund, the one my mother set up before she died. She'd been saving for my education since I was born, adding to it every month even when she got sick. The account had enough to cover my remaining 2 years of tuition. But when I called the bank, they told me the account had been emptied 3 months ago. My father, as the trustee, withdrew everything right around the time Dawn and Robert moved in. The bank representative was actually really nice when she heard my story. She pulled up the records and told me my father transferred all the money to a new account. She couldn't tell me exactly where it went, but she did hint that large payments were made to several furniture stores and a contractor right after. They used my college fund, the money my dying mother saved for me, to renovate my old room for Dawn and Robert's fake baby. Drake says I should report my father for misusing the trust fund. He even found a legal aid office that might be able to help, but I just don't have the energy for a legal battle right now. Between my 2 jobs, my remaining classes, and just trying to survive, I can barely keep my eyes open most days. The trailer's cold, the neighborhood's rough, and sometimes we can hear gunshots at night, but it's still better than my car. I did something stupid yesterday. I drove by my old house. There's a big dumpster in the driveway and construction vehicles parked outside. Through the window, I could see they've gutted my old room. The walls my mom and I painted together are probably in that dumpster now. I sat there in my car for almost an hour, just staring at the house, remembering all the times my mom and I baked cookies in that kitchen, or did puzzle games in the living room. It doesn't even feel like my home anymore. The grocery store manager caught me crying in the stockroom during my shift today. Instead of getting mad, he sat down with me and listened to my whole story. He's giving me more hours and moving me to the day shift so I can pick up extra shifts at the diner at night. It's not much, but it'll help. Right now, I'm just focusing on survival, keeping my head down, working my jobs, studying when I can. Some days it feels impossible, but I keep hearing my mom's voice in my head, telling me to never give up. Update 3. It's strange how life works out sometimes. I never thought I'd update this post again, but something happened yesterday that brought everything rushing back. These past 7 years have been transformative. I graduated college, took me 5 years instead of 4, landed a great job at an investment firm, and worked my way up to senior analyst. I married Rose, whom I met in my last year of college. She was the barista at the coffee shop where I used to study between shifts. We bought a house last year, something I never thought possible when I was sleeping in my car. Drake is doing great too. He finished trade school and now runs his own HVAC business. He was the best man at my wedding. Funny how the worst moment of my life led me to one of my best friends. I heard bits and pieces about my family over the years through old neighbors. Dawn eventually did get pregnant for real and had twins. Mrs. Chen told me they completely renovated the house, turning the guest room into a playroom and my old room into a nursery. She said my father aged a lot in these past years, stopped taking care of the yard, barely leaves for work anymore. Yesterday my father called from an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but something told me I should. His voice sounded different, older, weaker, broken. He was crying, something I'd only seen him do at my mother's funeral. Between sobs, he told me he needed my help. Apparently, Dawn and Robert had been working on Cecilia for months, convincing her to put the house in their names. They said it was the smart thing to do, would save on inheritance tax, would keep the house in the family for their kids. They even got their own lawyer to draw up the papers, someone from Robert's family. Cecilia, always wrapped around Dawn's finger, agreed. She transferred ownership of the house to them as a gift for their growing family. The moment the papers were signed and filed, Dawn and Robert put the house on the market. They sold it within a week, well under market value for a quick sale. They cleared out their stuff while my father was at work, took the twins, and disappeared. No note, no explanation, nothing. They even cleaned out the joint account Dawn had with Cecilia, which held most of my father's retirement savings. Cecilia had added Dawn to the account years ago to help manage the household expenses. When my father came home and found the house empty and a sold sign in the yard, he had a heart attack right there in the driveway. A neighbor found him and called an ambulance. He's in the hospital now with no home to return to, no savings, and no way to pay his medical bills. Cecilia apparently had a complete breakdown when she realized what happened. She packed a bag and went to stay with her sister in Florida, leaving my father alone in the hospital. He kept apologizing through his tears, saying he should have never chosen them over me, that he failed as a father, that he regrets everything. He told me about how proud he was when he heard about my success at work through old friends, how he kept every newspaper clipping when my firm was featured in local business news. He said he drives by my house sometimes, just to see how I'm doing, but never had the courage to knock. He asked if he could stay with me while he recovers, saying I was his only hope. The irony of him being homeless now isn't lost on me. Part of me wants to tell him exactly how it feels, to let him experience what I went through, but I'm not that person. I told him I would think about it and hung up. I then stared at an old photo of my mom and me at my 10th birthday party. My father took that picture. We were all so happy then. I keep thinking about something my mom used to say, that life has a way of bringing things full circle. 7 years ago, I was the one desperate for help, and he turned his back on me. Now he's in the same position, asking for the same grace he refused to show me. The difference is, I actually have the means to help him. The question is, should I? Update 4. I spent the last 2 weeks thinking about what to do about my father, talking it through with my wife and Drake. My wife, being the kind person she is, initially suggested we let him stay in our guest room. But the more we discussed it, the more we realized that wasn't the right solution. Drake reminded me of all those nights in the trailer when I'd wake up from nightmares about sleeping in my car. After much deliberation, I made my decision. I paid off my father's immediate medical bills. The hospital was threatening to discharge him despite his condition because of non-payment. But I made it clear he couldn't stay with us. Instead, I called Uncle Steve, the one who laughed when I needed help 7 years ago. I told him exactly what his brother needed and reminded him how he once said family should always help family. Funny how quiet he got when I brought that up. He tried to make excuses, but I cut him off and told him it was his turn to step up as a brother. I set up a small monthly allowance for my father's basic needs, enough to rent a modest apartment and cover utilities and food. I hired a social worker to help him find an affordable place and get signed up for any assistance programs he might qualify for. But that's where my help stops. No family dinners, no emotional support, no trying to rebuild our relationship. He made his choice 7 years ago when he watched me pack my life into my car and drive away. Yesterday, I got a long email from Cecilia. She's still in Florida with her sister, writing about how I need to forgive my father, how he's a broken man, how Dawn manipulated them all. She had the nerve to say they kicked me out because they truly believed I would land on my feet, that they knew I was strong enough to make it on my own. I didn't respond. They didn't care if I landed on my feet when I was sleeping in my car, missing meals, and working 2 jobs while trying to stay in school. Some of my extended family members have been posting on social media about how I'm being cruel, how families should forgive each other, how I'm punishing my father for Dawn's actions. They don't seem to remember how they all ignored my calls for help when I was homeless. It's amazing how people who weren't there to help you struggle suddenly have opinions about how you should spend your money. My wife asked me if I was sure about my decision, if I would regret not trying to rebuild a relationship with my father. I showed her something I've kept all these years, the last birthday card my mom ever gave me. Inside, she wrote about how proud she was of my kind heart, but reminded me that being kind doesn't mean letting people hurt me. She wanted me to be strong, to stand up for myself, to know my worth. I'm not being cruel by maintaining boundaries. I'm not being heartless by protecting myself. I remember those nights in my car, jumping at every sound, trying to study by the dome light, skipping meals to save money. I remember checking my phone every day, hoping my father would call to say it was all a mistake, that I could come home. That call never came. My father made his choice 7 years ago. He chose his new family over his son, and that choice had consequences. I've built a good life for myself, a loving wife, a beautiful home, a successful career, true friends like Drake who stood by me when my own family wouldn't. I'm at peace with my decision. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is accept that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about who stands by you when you need them most.
Point me to the enemy.
Countdown initiated. Stand by for takeoff.
Reinforcement budget depleted.
Extraction complete. Pelican 1 beginning ascent.
This city will soon be a shining beacon of freedom once more.